Good Saturday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for October the 21st. Today, we are reading together in First Chronicles chapters 25 and 26, which is going to continue the writing of the chronicler concerning David's preparation for the building of the temple and the institution of temple worship. We're going to continue to see that today, looking at the Levites and the various roles they're going to play as musicians, as gatekeepers, as treasurers, as judges. We'll see all that here in First Chronicles chapters 25 and 26. Let me get the text up on the screen for us. We'll read along together here, beginning in First Chronicles chapter 25 and verse number 1. David and the officers of the army also set apart some of the sons of Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun, who were to prophesy, accompanied by lyres, harps, and cymbals. This is the list of men who performed their service. From Asaph's sons, Zakur, Joseph, Nethaniah, Azarela, sons of Asaph under Asaph's authority, who prophesied under the authority of the king. From Jeduthun's sons, Gedaliah, Zeri, Jeshiah, Shimei, Hashabiah, and Mattathiah, 6, under the authority of their father Jeduthun, prophesying to the accompaniment of lyres, giving thanks and praise to Yahweh. From Heman's sons, Bukiah, Mattaniah, Uziel, Shebuel, Jeremoth, Hanani, Elithah, Gedalti, Ramati Azer, Joshbeksha, Malothi, Hothir, and Mahazioth. All these sons of Heman, the king's seer, were given by the promises of God to exalt him, for God had given Heman 14 sons and 3 daughters, and obviously did not catch that on the highlighting. Verse number 6, all these men were under their own father's authority for the music in Yahweh's temple, with cymbals, harps, and lyres for the service of God's temple. Asaph, Jeduthun, and Heman were under the king's authority. They numbered 288 together with their relatives, who were all trained and skillful in music for Yahweh. They cast lots for their duties, young and old alike, teacher as well as pupil. The first lot for Asaph fell to Joseph, his sons, and his relatives, 12 total. To Gedaliah, the second, him and his relatives and sons, 12. The third to Zakur, his sons and relatives, 12. The fourth to Ezri, his sons and relatives, 12. The fifth to Nethaniah, his sons and relatives, 12. The sixth to Bukiah, his sons and relatives, 12. The seventh to Jesarela, his sons and relatives, 12. The eighth to Jeshiah, his sons and relatives, 12. The ninth to Mattaniah, his sons and relatives, 12. The 10th to Shimei, his sons and his relatives, 12. The 11th to Azarel, his sons and relatives, 12. The 12th to Hashabiah, his sons and relatives, 12. The 13th to Shubael, his sons and relatives, 12. The 14th to Mattathiah, his sons and relatives, 12. The 15th to Jeremoth, his sons and relatives, 12. The 16th to Hananiah, his sons and relatives, 12. The 17th to Joshbekasha, his sons and relatives, 12. The 18th to Hanani, his sons and relatives, 12. The 19th to Malothi, his sons and relatives, 12. The 20th to Eliathah, his sons and relatives, 12. The 21st to Hothir, his sons and relatives, 12. The 22nd to Gedaldi, his sons and relatives, 12. The 23rd to Mahazioth, his sons and relatives, 12. And the 24th to Romati Azer, his sons and relatives, 12. The following were the divisions of the gatekeepers. From the Korahites, Meshelemiah, son of Korah, one of the sons of Asaph. Meshelemiah and had sons, Zechariah the firstborn, Jediael the second, Zebediah the third, Jothniel the fourth, Elam the fifth, Jehohanan Jehohanan the sixth, Elihonai the seventh. Obed Edom also had sons: Shemaiah the firstborn, Jehozabad the second, Joah the third, Sakar the fourth, Nethanel the fifth, Amiel the sixth, Issachar the seventh, and Puletai the eighth, for God blessed him. Also, to his son Shemaiah were born sons who ruled their ancestral families because they were strong, capable men. Shemaiah's sons, Othni, Raphael, Obed, and Elzabad, his relatives Elihu and Semachiah were also capable men. All of these were among the sons of Obed Edom with his sons and relatives. They were capable men with strength for the work, 62 from Obed Edom. Meshelemiah also had sons and relatives who were capable men, 18. Hosa from the Merarites also had sons. Shimri the first, although he was not the firstborn, his father had appointed him as the first. Hilkiah the second, Tebaliah the third, and Zechariah the fourth. The sons and relatives of Hosa were 13 in all. These divisions of the gatekeepers under the leading men had duties for the ministering of Yahweh's temple, just as their relatives did. They cast lots for each temple gate according to their ancestral families, young and old alike. The lot for the east gate fell to Shelemiah. They were cast lots for his son Zechariah, an insightful counselor, and his lot came out for the north gate. Obed Edom's was the south gate, and the son's lot was for the storehouse. It was the west gates and the gate of Shalemeketh on the ascending highway for Shupim and Hosa. There were guards stationed at every watch. There were 6 Levites each day on the east, 4 each day on the north, 4 each day on the south, and 2 pair at the storehouses. As for the court on the west, they were 4 at the highway and 2 at the court. Those were the divisions of the gatekeepers from the descendants of the Korahites and Merarites. From the Levites, Ahijah was in charge of the treasuries of God's temple and the treasuries of what had been dedicated. From the sons of Ladan, they were the descendants of the Gershonites through Ladan and were the family heads belonging to Ladan the Gershonite, Jehieli. The sons of Jehieli, Zetham and his brother Joel, were in charge of the treasuries of Yahweh's temple. From the Amramites and the Isharites, the Hebronites, and the Uzzielites, Shebuel, a descendant of Moses' son Gershom, was the officer in charge of the treasuries. His relatives through Eleazar, his son Rehabiah, his son Jeshiah, his son Joram, his son Zikri, and his son Shelomith. This Shelomith and his relatives were in charge of all the treasuries of what had been dedicated by King David, by the family heads, who were the commanders of thousands and of hundreds, and by the army commanders. They dedicated part of the plunder from their battles for the repair of Yahweh's temple. All that the seer Samuel, Saul, son of Kish, Abner, son of Ner, and Joab, son of Zeruiah, had dedicated, along with everything else that had been dedicated, were in the care of Shelomith and his relatives. From the Israelites, Chenaniah and his sons had duties outside the temple as officers and judges over Israel. From the Hebronites, Hashabiah and his relatives, 1,700 capable men, had assigned duties in Israel west of the Jordan for all the work of Yahweh and for the service of the king. From the Hebronites, Jerijah was the head of the Hebronites according to the family records of his ancestry, of his ancestors. A search was made in the 40th year of David's reign, and strong, capable men were found among them at Jazer in Gilead. There were among Jerijah's relatives 2,700 capable men who were family heads. King David appointed them over the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh as overseers in every matter relating to God and the king. And that is the reading of First Samuel really messed it up. First Chronicles chapters 25 and 26. These 2 chapters put a nice bow on the focus, it seems, specifically pertaining to things that would help the temple to function. So going all the way back to chapter 18, no, let's see here, chapter 22. So chapter 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26 all focus on things specific to the building of the temple and the support of the function of the temple. Going back to chapter 22, we see the preparations for the temple. Beginning in 23, we see the Levites, who were going to be special servants in the temple complex. The Levites themselves are identified in 23. And then specifically in 24, we have the divisions of the priest specifically. Then in 25, we have the Levites who are going to be musicians. 26, we're going to have those who are going to be gatekeepers, which that's basically temple security, those who would maintain sacred space. And it's noted here that this responsibility mattered. That the divisions of the gatekeepers, chapter 26, verse 12, under their leading men had duties for ministering in Yahweh's temple, just as their relatives did. So you're thinking about those within the temple who were the priests who would be offering sacrifices, offering prayers, those who would be participating in musical worship that was established by David, because obviously David, being a musician himself, had a real soft spot and a real appreciation for music and for the musical worship of Yahweh. So he made sure that was something that he really focused on. But then we get to the gatekeepers, and the language that's used here tells me that they matter too, that their work mattered just as much as the work of those who offered sacrifices, those who were involved in the prayers, those in offering incense, those in doing washings, those who were the musicians. These people, they had their responsibilities just as their relatives did, and their part mattered. Because again, what are the gatekeepers doing? Well, they're acting as security. Security for what, though? Security for sacred space. They're making sure that people who are not supposed to be there do not come in. They're making sure that things that were not supposed to be there, they did not make their way in. If somebody tried to bring an idol into the temple setting, into the temple complex, it would be their responsibility to make sure that did not happen, and that those who did such a thing were strongly rebuked and even punished. Going back to, I wish I'd written that down. Let's see here. Let's see if I find it real fast. Back in Numbers, I'll say it's Numbers 3. Let me see how my memory is doing today. I think it was in Numbers 3. Numbers 3. Oh, yes, there we go. Numbers 3 and verse number 10. We read that you are to appoint Aaron and his sons to carry out their priestly responsibilities, but any unauthorized person who comes near the sanctuary is to be put to death. Well, who seems to be the person responsible for that? It seems that is these gatekeepers. They are later on described as guards. At the end of verse 16, there were guards stationed every watch. So these guards, these gatekeepers, this temple security, they were responsible for making sure that things that were not supposed to be in the temple complex did not make it into the temple complex. We also see that we have basically the accountants for the temple, those who are in charge of the treasury. Those are mentioned in verses 20 through 28. And then in verse 29, we see that many of the judges that would have been doing work within the temple were from the Levites as well. So we're just thinking about these two chapters together, 25 and 26. I actually want to talk about 26 to begin with. Just a few notes here. Chapter 26 was probably recorded to describe the ideal structure of musical worship within the temple. Again, something David cared about, something he was going to focus on. During the earliest days of the temple under Solomon, this would have been what worship looked like. So it seems that the chronicler is detailing that to the people so that this could be something that they might be able to shoot for as well in their return to worship post the exile. But also mention again that musical worship mattered to David, and it needed to matter to the returning Jews. It mattered in the temple under Solomon. It needed to matter to those who are returning from exile. They need to make sure that they worship God in a musical way. It was something that was very special. It was something that they could all participate in various ways. So that was something that mattered to them. It mattered previously under David and under Solomon, and it needs to matter to those returning as well. Then getting in chapter 25, we're looking at these again. We've had all these different divisions of the priests that are mentioned and the various roles that they had. And now we talk about those who are, again, gatekeepers or accountants or judges. All of these tasks are important to Yahweh. They all mattered in the process of the temple and the things that would be done there. Going back to chapter 23 and verse 24, we read about that these were the descendants of Levi by their ancestral families, the family heads according to their registration by name in the head count, 20 years old or more, who worked in the service of Yahweh's temple. We see that in verse 24, also in verse number verse number 32 of chapter 23. All these various individuals, let's see, 32, 32, 32, not 32, 31. I guess it is 31. Yeah, 31. Those were the descendants of the Levites according to their ancestral families. They cast lots the same way the relatives and descendants of Aaron did in the presence of King David, Zadok, Ahimelech, and the heads of the families and the priests and Levites, the family heads and their young brothers. Like, I guess that's not right. Oh, no wonder, because I'm reading the complete wrong chapter. That would help some. 32. There we go. They are to carry out their responsibilities for the tent of meeting, for the holy place, and for the relatives, the descendants of Aaron, in the service of Yahweh. Simply again, for Levites, I know maybe sometimes we get ourselves confused, thinking that, oh, well, if you wanted to be a priest, you had to be a Levite. But then we might be thinking that all Levites were priests. And again, that's not true, because not all Levites were descendants of Aaron. Aaron's line specifically was the priestly line. So if you weren't a priest and you were a Levite, that doesn't mean you weren't useful. You could be a musician. You could be a gatekeeper. You could be an accountant. You could be one of the judges. There was something for you to do. Again, all of these tasks, no matter what you did as a Levite, your part mattered, and you were valuable in Yahweh's eyes. And thinking about that from the perspective of the Levites, who again, the priesthood comes from, we think about ourselves today. Now, all of us are priests within the priesthood under Jesus. And similar to the Levites here, we all have a role to play. Do we recognize that role? And are we excited to fulfill whatever role it is that we have identified we can help with within the local church? That needs to be something that we are concerned with. That needs to be something that we are excited for. That needs to be something that we give great effort toward. So may God help us to do that, to identify what role we can play, and to recognize that it is an important role, that it is a valuable role, and then it all goes into the working of God's people, within whom we are among. So think about that from here in the Levites. Think about all the various roles that they played, and how it all mattered, how it was all necessary, and how it all helped for the temple processes to be carried out well. That was how it was in the days of Solomon early on. And here the chronicler is identifying that to those post-exile, saying, hey, this is what we're shooting for. We're all shooting to have a role to play, and to play it well. If you have any questions about this text here in 1 Chronicles 25 and 26, please feel free to leave that in the comments section below. And I appreciate you taking some time to read along with me on this Saturday. Hope you have a great rest of your Saturday, and hope you'll take time to join in again in the morning as we read together just a single chapter. We're going to be reading together in 1 Chronicles chapter 27. Hope to see you then. Take care, and God bless.